on taking his axe with him. That meant doubling the guard to make sure Sonny didn't lose his self-control when he saw his former persecutors within chopping distance. It went off much better than either Paul Millard or Louis Goffredo expected. After the first shock of being airborne had worn off, Mom found that she liked contragravity riding. Sonny was wildly delighted with it from the start. The natives showed neither of them any hostility. Mom's lavender bathrobe and Sonny's green coveralls and big axe seemed to be symbols of a new and exalted status. Even the Lord Mayor was extremely polite to them. The Lord Mayor and half a dozen others got a contragravity ride, too, to the meadows to pick out cattle. A dozen animals, including a pair of the 2-ton draft beasts, were driven to the Terran camp. A couple of lorry loads of assorted vegetables were brought in, too. Everybody seemed very happy about the deal, especially Bennett Fayon. He wanted to slaughter one of the sheep-sized meat and milk animals at once and get to work on it. Goffredo advised him to put it off till the next morning. He wanted a large native audience to see the animal being shot with a rifle. The water tower was finished and the big spherical tank hoisted on top of it and made fast. A pump and a filter system were installed. There was no water for hot showers that evening, though. They would have to run a pipeline to the river, and that would entail a ditch that would cut through several cultivated fields, which in turn would provoke an uproar. Paul Millard didn't want that happening until he'd concluded the cattle trade. Charlie Loughran and Willie Schellenmacher had gone up to the ship on one of the landing craft. They accompanied the landing party that went down into the mountains. Ayesha Keithley arrived late in the afternoon on another landing craft with 5 or 6 tons of instruments and parts and equipment, and a male Navy warrant officer helper. They looked around the lab Lillian had been using at one end of the headquarters hut. "This won't do," the girl Navy officer said. "We can't get a quarter of the apparatus we're going to need in here. We'll have to build something." Dave Questel was drawn into the discussion. Yes, he could put up something big enough for everything the girls would need to install, and soundproof it. Concrete, he decided. They'd have to wait till he got the water line down and the pump going, though. There was a crowd of natives in the fields gaping at the Terran camp the next morning, and Goffredo decided to kill the animal. Until they learned the native name, they were calling it Domesticated Type C. It was herded out where everyone could watch, and a Marine stepped forward, unslung his rifle, took a kneeling position, and aimed at it. It was 150 yards away. Mom had come out to see what was going on. Sonny and Howell, who had been consulting by signs over the construction of a wagon, were standing side by side. The Marine squeezed his trigger. The rifle banged, and the Domesticated C bounded into the air, dropped and kicked a few times, and was still. The natives, however, missed that part of it. They were howling piteously and rubbing their heads. All but Sonny. He was just mildly surprised at what had happened to the Dom C. Sonny, it would appear, was stone deaf. As anticipated, there was another uproar later in the morning when the ditching machine started north across the meadow. A mob of savants, seeing its relentless progress toward a field of something like turnips, gathered in front of it, twittering and brandishing implements of agriculture, many of them Terran-made. Paul Millard was ready for this. 2 lorries went out, one loaded with Marines who jumped off with their rifles ready. By this time, all the savants knew what rifles would do besides make a noise. Millard, Darver, Goffredo, and a few others got out of the other vehicle and unloaded presents. Goffredo did the talking. The savants couldn't understand him, but they liked it. They also liked the presents, which included a dozen empty half-gallon rum demijohns, tarpaulins, and a lot of assorted knickknacks. The pipeline went through. He and Sonny got the forge set up. There was no fuel for it. A party of Marines had gone out to the east to cut wood. When they got back, they burnt some charcoal in the pit that had been dug beside the camp. Until then, he and Sonny were drawing plans for a wooden wheel with a metal tire when Lillian came out of the headquarters hut with a clipboard under her arm. She motioned to him. "Come on over," he told her. "You can talk in front of Sonny. He won't mind. He can't hear." "Can't hear?" she echoed. "You mean—" "That's right. Sonny's stone deaf. He didn't even hear that rifle going off. The only one of this gang that has brains enough to pour sand out of a boot with the directions on the bottom of the heel, and he's a total linguistic loss. So he isn't a halfwit after all. He's got an IQ close to genius level. Look at this. He never saw a wheel before yesterday. Now he's designing one." Lillian's eyes widened. So that's why Mom's so sharp about sign talk. She's been doing it all his life. Then she remembered what she had come out to show him and held out the clipboard. "You know how that analyzer of mine works? Well, here's what Aisha's going to do. After breaking a sound into frequency bands, instead of being photographed and projected, each band goes to an analyzer of its own and is projected on its own screen. There'll be 40 of them, each for a band of 100 cycles, from 0 to 4,000. That seems to be the Svant vocal range." The diagram passed from hand to hand during cocktail time before dinner. Bennett Fayol had been working all day dissecting the animal they were all calling a Domsee, a name which would stick even if and when they learned the native name. He glanced disinterestedly at the drawing, then looked again more closely. Then he set down the drink he was holding in his other hand and studied it intently. "You know what you have here?" he asked. "This is a very close analogy to the hearing organs of that animal I was working on. The comb, as we've assumed, is the external organ. It's covered with small flaps and fissures. Back of each fissure is a long, narrow membrane. They're paired, one on each side of the comb, and from them, nerves lead to clusters of small, round membranes. Nerves lead from them to a complex nerve cable at the bottom of the comb and into the brain at the base of the skull. I couldn't understand how the system functioned, but now I see it. Each of the larger membranes on the outside responds to a sound frequency band, and the small ones on the inside break the bands down to individual frequencies." "How many of the little ones are there?" Aisha asked. "Thousands of them. The inner comb is simply packed with them. Wait, I'll show you." He rose and went away, returning with a sheaf of photo enlargements and a number of blocks of lucite in which specimens were mounted. Everybody examined them. Anna de Jong, as a practicing psychologist, had an MD, and to get that she'd had to know a modicum of anatomy. She was puzzled. "I can't understand how they hear with those things. I'll grant that the membranes will respond to sound, but I can't see how they transmit it." "But they do hear," Millard said. "Their musical instruments, their reactions to our voices, the way they are affected by sounds like gunfire." "They hear, but they don't hear in the same way we do," Phaon replied. "If you can't be convinced by anything else, look at these things and compare them with the structure of the human ear or the ear of any member of any other sapient race we've ever contacted. That's what I've been saying from the beginning. They have sound perception to an extent that makes ours look almost like deafness," Aisha Keithley said. "I wish I could design a sound detector 1/10 as good as this must be." "Yes, the way the Lord Mayor said fwunk and the way Paul Millard said it sounded entirely different to them. Of course, fwunk and poink and tweet and kwoosh sound alike to them, but let's don't be too picky about things." End of Part 4.